Welcome to lesson 10. This is called bars, tombolos, beaches and dunes. There are no keywords as we are continuing our theme of deposition at the coast when landforms are created by deposition. Please kindly write the title. Please pause the video and write the answers to the Connect quiz. Now look, when you get to question 7, it says where are the best beaches in the UK and why? This is a really intentionally tricky question. I'm not expecting you to write that the best beaches in the UK are near my nan's house because the ice cream is good. Instead, I want you to be referring to something like something about rock type, and have a think about which rock type creates the best beaches, and also have a think about wave type. What kind of wave is going to produce a big, large, deep beach? So have a think about that. Please mark your answers. For question 7, the south and the southeast is where you find the best beaches. Reason for that: rock is sedimentary, so it erodes and weathers very quickly, turning into sand. And waves are often constructive as opposed to destructive. The reason for that is that the fetch is much shorter. So at its shortest point, it's only 26 miles across the sea between the UK and France. People can even swim across the channel. Whereas around the west of the UK, the fetch is several thousands of miles across the Atlantic Ocean. So therefore waves are much bigger, more destructive and often erode. Whereas on the south coast we get much more deposition. Last lesson we learnt about this really important process called longshore drift, and we learnt how longshore drift moves sediment or sand along a beach. The swash came in at an angle due to prevailing wind. The backwash goes back down at right angles due to gravity, and this process repeated in this zigzag way, and it moved sand sediment along the coastline. When the coastline changes direction at a bay, so here's where it starts to change direction like that, we found sand was deposited out across the bay to form a sand spit. But what happens when the spit stretches all the way across the bay? We get the formation of a bar. That's all it is. A bar stretches all the way across a lagoon. Sorry, all the way across a bay, and what we have forming behind the bar is a lagoon. So wherever you find a bar, you find a lagoon. The other feature we're going to learn about is something, this bizarre word that is a real word, called tombolo. And a tombolo basically means when a sand spit has stretched out and reached across to an island. And you can actually walk across these, okay? Watch this carefully. So this shows us the direction of longshore drift across the mouth of a bay. What starts to form as a result of deposition is our bar. And the bay has more or less turned into a lagoon, and it's completely closed off. Let's draw a simple sketch. And please note that for this, it's just a simple 3-mark question because there's not a huge amount we need to say. if you could please write this subtitle, pause the video when you need to, and then draw yourself a box, and we're going to work through this. So if you remember, here's our coastline. It changes direction at a bay, for example. Please remember that this is a bird's eye view. So the first thing that happens is we have a process. We have longshore drift. Now you don't need to explain it, because really the focus of this question is about a bar and a lagoon, and you just don't need to go into detail about longshore drift. We know that longshore drift is moving sediment along the coast. The second point is the coastline changes direction, and when the coastline changes direction, we have deposition. And we're going to draw that in there in a second, just like we have the formation of a spit. But point 3 is the formation of the bar and the lagoon. So here's our sand being deposited across the mouth of our bay, and finally we end up with the formation of a bar and a lagoon behind it. I think the key word, it's not really a key word, but I think the word across is really important here, because this describes what happens to the bar. The bar stretches across the bay, which is what it was before, creating the bar and the lagoon. So if you now want to mark this up, so our feature was a lagoon, our feature was a bar, and our main processes were longshore drift and deposition. So here we've got nice and clearly point 1, there's your first mark. Point 2 is your second mark. Point 3 is your third mark, where you're going to mention these features. Please now complete that, pause it, and then write the question and see if you can do that step by step. A good way to start it would be with the word firstly, so we get things in the right order. Okay, let's check this. So we said firstly, it's a good way of starting it. Longshore drift, good, we've mentioned that. It transports material along, we've done that. Next mark. Next, sediment, so we've got next in there, we've got another sequencing connective. We've mentioned deposition, it's deposited across a bay or estuary, good, we mentioned that too. Our third mark, this is called a bar and a lagoon forms behind it, so we've mentioned our key features. This bit here was important too, if you remember. I said that you need to deposit sand across a bay or estuary. Please give yourselves a mark out of 3 and check and correct anything you didn't quite get right. This is how we form a tombolo. If you remember, tombolo is formed again when longshore drift moves material along, the coastline changes direction, and then sand or sediment is deposited out across to an island. So what I'd like to do, we don't really need to draw a sketch for this because it's exactly the same as the previous one, but you need to mention that the line of sand stretches out across to meet an island, and this is called a tombolo. So the first point, again, you mention longshore drift. The second point, you mention deposition when the coastline changes direction. And the third point, you need to say something about an island. Give it a go, pause the video. Please check and correct. Just as before, longshore drift transports material. I used the word firstly again. Second point, next, sand is deposited when the coastline changes direction. And our third point, and this was where it got different, finally, the tombolo is where the line of sand reaches an island. Tick the island, tick the Tombolo. So here we've got beaches and sand dunes. Now this is straightforward really. A beach is formed when constructive waves, remember that the swash is larger than the backwash, when constructive waves deposit sand on the coast, on the shore. Then the formation of a sand dune happens when additional sand is blown onto the back of the beach by offshore wind. And what happens over time is plants start to establish in a sand dune, and this then encourages more sand to accumulate. So you have the formation of sand dunes, which generally they grow over time. For this, we're not going to draw a diagram. Instead, we can just write it in a really simple way. So we're going to explain the formation, how it's made of a beach and sand dune. And it's a 3-mark question. We're going to keep it simple. The first thing you need to write about is the wave type. And you can get a mark for saying what kind of wave it is. Then we're going to write about a process. So was it erosion or was it deposition? And then lastly, we'll mention a sand dune. So we're going to say wave type plus a process. And then finally, we're going to say something about the sand dune. Now this was when you have offshore wind. Now what is it that the offshore wind, that sea breeze that you know when you go to the beach, what is it that offshore wind does and how does it create the sand dune? Pause the video, give yourself 3 minutes to do that. Go back on the video to my explanation if that helps. Answers. Firstly, constructive waves, tick. Deposit, we needed a process. They deposit sand onto the coast. That's already 2 marks. Our 3rd mark, offshore wind, which I suppose is a feature, but you can't see it, you can't touch it, but there you go. Offshore wind blows more sand onto the back of a beach. There is our 3rd mark. I told you it was easy. So what we've got now is a quiz that tests your understanding of spits, bars and tombolos. So you're going to get 15 seconds for each photo. There are 14 photos. I want you to write down in your book or write down on a piece of paper whether the photo shows a spit, a bar or a tombolo. So let's get ready. Your 15 seconds starts. 3, 2, 1. Go. Here are your answers. If you got 13 or 14, you are awesome. If you got 11 to 12, you are amazing. If you got anything upwards of about 8, you are doing really well. Okay, please pause the video and write the answers to the questions here that check understanding from lessons much earlier on in this series. Here are your answers. Please check and correct. Next lesson is a straightforward one about human activities at the coast, and that will be lesson 11. I'll see you then. Thanks.